Today, the Vatican released a new document, probably it is the first major document by Pope Leo called DILEXI Te. He loved you. This is kind of a part 2 to the first document, DILEXI Nos, that was released previously. The document has 120 something paragraphs, and I listened to the press conference while I was working today, put it on, listened to it on the background of the various people that were speaking about it, Konrad Krajewski, Cardinal Cherry, and others. Matteo Bruni was there as well. And so it was just an interesting document. Really wanted to see, well, what's the Pope's thinking? What does he want to say to us, and what direction are we going? And it very, very, very much smells like a document from the Pope Francis papacy. There's no doubt about that. I just want to kind of make 2 reflections, and I do this in the spirit of synodality. We are called to voice our thoughts on this document, I suppose. In this church that is synodal, I suppose, if the Germans can go off and do the stuff that they're doing, I don't think, as a Catholic Irish blogger, I don't think there's any problem with me as a lay Catholic blogger giving my feedback on this document with love for the church. And my big problem with this document is what is defined as poor. Who is the poor? And I suppose when you don't have a clear definition of the poor, you're giving a magisterial teaching that kind of just focuses on one class of poverty without understanding what is poverty. And I suppose the reason I'm saying this is because there is a class of poverty that is not mentioned in this document whatsoever: the unborn child. How, as a society, can we love the other if we can't love the person inside of us? If we can't teach our society to love the child that you have conceived out of so-called love in the church. I suppose this kind of comes back after the very clumsy remarks that Pope Leo made outside Castel Gandolfo, kind of saying, oh, look, you can't be pro-life if you don't respect migrants, and if you support capital punishment, you cannot be pro-life, be called pro-life. Well, the support for capital punishment, which the church has long held is permissible, has never rendered somebody excommunicated. Mistreatment of as a migrant is a grave offence. It's a grave offence against charity. Why would anybody treat somebody in that way? But I suppose many people are kind of debating, well, how should we treat migrants? Because this is a very hot topic especially in the West at the moment. But leaving aside this whole problem on migration, we also have the problem in the West that the poorest of the poor, the unborn child, isn't recognized as somebody that is the other that needs to be respected. And there is a moment in this document which I thought was interesting. It's in paragraph 16, and it says, precisely in order to share the limitations and fragility of our human nature, he became poor as was born in flesh like us. We came to know him in the smallness of a child in a manger and in the extreme humiliation of the cross. Now, the reason I'm quoting that piece of chapter 16, because the document does go on to quote Saint Teresa of Calcutta. And Saint Teresa of Calcutta obviously embodied what it means to give your life for the poor. But Teresa of Calcutta also advocated for, spoke out against the destruction of the poorest of the poor, the unborn child. And we didn't just come to see Christ in the smallest of a child laid in a manger. The first moment in the Gospels that we see Christ is when the child leaps for joy in the womb of Saint Elizabeth, when Blessed Virgin Mary visits her. We see somebody recognizing the presence of Christ in the womb of Mary. We destroy 10,000 unborn children in Ireland, every year. And why I have so much focus on this subject is because we witnessed the cultural change in Ireland in 2018. We were one of the last Catholic countries in the world that introduced liberal abortion laws. And our rates went from 2,000 before the laws was changed to 6,666 in 2019, and then up to 10,000 just in the Republic. And then if you add on the abortions in Northern Ireland, which they also changed the laws, we see a massive cultural change. It's important to note. We've seen a massive cultural change in our church, in our teaching, not in the sense in the catechism, but really in our magisterial teaching. We've introduced some novel ways of managing this topic. You know, the fact that a cardinal could give a lifetime achievement award to a politician who legislated for abortion, promotes abortion, saying it's a fundamental human right. According to our catechism, formal cooperation with abortion in that way means you're excommunicated. That is the teaching of the church. And in DILEXI TE, it does talk about the kind of a little poke at defenders of orthodoxy, quoting a document from 1984 on liberation theology. So, kind of saying, oh, look, you have these rigid people that are all about orthodoxy of faith and ignoring the plight of the poor or even supporting some regimes that cause suffering to the poor. And in a way, look, on both sides there could be problems here, but we will never have the true fruits of the gospel, of Christian fruit, true Christian fruits, if we do not have firm Christian roots and firm Christian foundations in our spiritual life. Pope Francis and now Pope Leo yearn for the fruits of the gospel, of Christian fruits to transform the world. But we don't teach the road to transformation. To be clear, true transformation in the spiritual life, true heights in prayer, true contemplation, true union with God, can only come with love of God and love of neighbour. So you cannot bypass the love of the poor or service to the poor, and the poor or your neighbour are all around you. You cannot bypass serving them in order to ascend in the spiritual life. There is no other way. But you also cannot arrive to the heights of the spiritual life if you don't speak about who the other is. If you kill the child in your womb, you completely destroy any progress in your spiritual life. You've already destroyed it. Very uncomfortable thing to speak in this world. And again, the mission of the church is towards salvation of souls. Our love of the neighbour, is to help them on their journey to know Christ, to be transformed by Christ. And if you read the writings of Maria Valtorta, and I will be in Italy this weekend, it's actually the anniversary of Maria Valtorta's death on Sunday, so I would be privileged to be at her tomb. But if you read them, Christ had such a delicate and beautiful care for the poor. And he asks his disciples to do the same. Again, there is no progress whatsoever in the spiritual life without love of other. You find that in the writings of St. Teresa of Avila in the interior castle, Las Moradas. It's that 101. It is the key that unlocks the spiritual life. So on the one hand, the Pope wants us to love the other, to love the poor, and to treat everybody with dignity and respect that they deserve. But when you completely forget the poorest of the poor, the unborn, who we've always held from the earliest times of the church as a person, we've always taught against their killing. We have spiritual zombies walking around because we can't treat the unborn with dignity and respect. It's not so much those that carry out this act, but it's also a society that enables it, and politicians that get rewarded for it, because we say, well, we'll turn a blind eye to that, and a pope that makes clumsy remarks about what he knows is happening in Chicago, a city where he is born. He has daily phone calls with his brother in Chicago. How could a Catholic in Chicago not be aware of the big discussion that is happening about a cardinal that is giving a Lifetime Achievement Award to an excommunicated politician who his own bishop in the archdiocese has refused communion? And you have two bishops. On the one hand, yes, there's a whole migration problem happening in the US. But on the other side, as society, those that lead society are called to protect the common good in that society. And can we say in the West we are protecting the common good when we allow laws that allow the destruction of the unborn that has a massive impact on our society, where we see population rates plummeting because we're not replacing ourselves, aging populations plummeting to less than 1.5 children per couple or less, 1.1 I think in Italy and Spain, something crazy like that. And in order to maintain the country, you have to rely on immigration, which is a change in culture, where you see this cultural friction playing out, especially in Europe, where you're bringing in a different culture that will not integrate with our culture. Is this going to protect the common good? These are all difficult questions and relevant questions to ask. But as I said, DILEXI TE, God loved you since your conception. That's when God loved you. Our Western society slaughters by the millions the unborn. They are the poorest of the poor, the unspoken. And when the church doesn't give them a voice, when our magisterial documents don't give them a voice, when they're not even mentioned, how do we expect our church to love the poor? How do we expect the fruits? If we do not catechize and teach and bring and mentor people in the spiritual life to union with God, how can we expect fruits in the spiritual life? Otherwise, the document is parroting UN or WHO documents. Really? The spiritual understanding of the poor has to be holistic, from conception to natural death. I find it interesting the whole document that it's not even brushed upon or touched upon, or that we will, go after a little bit the defenders of orthodoxy, who, we all know who they are in the church. I give this video in with love and feedback to the church. Like, it's not, But as I said, I'm a Catholic blogger. We were one of the last Catholic countries that saw our culture change dramatically since 2018. It's fascinating to sit back and watch your culture change from a culture of life to a culture of death. It is interesting, and we see across the UK that have been promoting abortion for decades. Now they've moved on to assisted suicide. And no sooner than legislation in the UK is passed, I guarantee you, 101%, as soon as the legislation in the UK is passed, it will be passed in Ireland. Because we can't be exporting our problems to the UK. Culture of death. The church was one of the only institutions that recognized the value of life from conception to natural death, and would promote that and defend that recognition in their magisterial documents. We can't redefine poor as just those sentient human beings that have been born outside the womb. We meet Christ in the womb of the Blessed Virgin Mary during the visitation. And, that is an immense poverty that is ignored in many places. Just my take on this document, I thought at least one paragraph would mention that. But nothing. We quote St. Teresa of Calcutta, but she also spoke about the poverty of the unborn child. How can we love? How can we ascend in the spiritual life, love the other, and not recognize the other that is there before our eyes in our own society? And it's probably a symptom of a greater problem in the church, this lack of firm foundations in the spiritual life. We're trying to educate the church. This document is going out to the church on who the other is. We're failing to recognize the other starts at conception. And universally we have to treat that other with the dignity and respect and love that they require, wherever they are, whoever they are. Just my thoughts on it, on the document, which is good, but kind of has it's interesting who we're talking about in this document, But anyway, God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.